You are listening to the People Centric podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hey, people-centric leaders. We are here again to join you for another episode. We're approaching our 200th episode. I'm just putting this out there, like we are getting closer and closer to our 200th episode. This is like episode, I think, 192, something like that. And when we travel around, I have to say, when we travel around, we do run into people who hear our podcast, and it's starting to get kind of exciting. We'll be at the airport and people will just run up to us and ask for autographs, or we'll be at events and people bring their children up to us and ask us, is it
people, Dawn?
Are you saying what, Bethany?
Do not lie to the people.
Okay, that's lying. It's totally
Thank
lying.
you, Bethany. Thank you for calling out the shenanigans.
I've never autographed a baby. That was
Well,
not true.
I will.
I've
There
never-
was one person recently, though, very epic, holding donuts and helping someone in a wheelchair who paused to talk about the podcast. So that is real.
That is true. Yes. Also, thank you for that person, because obviously you know who you are, because who was doing that? Yeah. So we were visiting a hospital and somebody was pushing someone in a wheelchair and holding a thing of donuts and ran into us and said, People Centric Podcast. Love you guys. That's cool. So we do hear. So while I did exaggerate a lot, we have never been stopped at an airport or people don't recognize us for that. We do appreciate all of you as listeners of the People Centric Podcast, because we like bringing you different topics. And so for this episode, we've got a good chunk of our team with us, and we'll go through that here in just a second. But what we want to talk about is weird. We're going to talk about how weird we need to be. The market is changing. Weird things are happening out in the market. If you think about it, like if you just look at the news, like airplanes are falling out of this, not airplanes, but parts are falling off of airplanes. They're falling off, and it's for dumb reasons. Like we forgot to put the bolts on that. And they're digging into it. It's like, yeah, we didn't put the bolts on that. They're like, well, what happened when you were supposed to put the bolts on? They're like, we don't know. We didn't record that either. You go to restaurants and like you see signs on the door like, oh, we're not open today. I'm sorry. Or we don't make that today because we don't know. We lost our ability to make that, or whatever it is. Or we work with publishers, and a lot of publishers, their advertisers are like, we don't have designers anymore to design our stuff. And a lot of this is going back to the idea of what we are calling the perfect storm, which we already did an episode on. And it's this idea of this huge labor shortage. First of all, there's a shortage of people. And second of all, our workforce is getting younger as boomers are retiring. And younger is not bad, but younger is less experienced, and younger is also bringing a culture shift and all these other things. So the market has flipped in the labor market. And so people are looking for jobs, and they are in the seat. They're in control of the situation, because there are a lot more jobs than there are people. There's a lot more jobs available than there are people available to take those jobs. So employers, you used to just have a job and you'd post it out there and say like, I have a job and it's what everybody wants. And so everybody would go to apply for your job, and you would say, now you show me how badly you want this job. And now the market has flipped. So now people are asking, hey, how badly do you want me as an employee to the employers, which is a weird way of looking at things. So what we are saying is now, employers, listen up. We got to get weird. We got to change our mindset on how we work with people, how we have people in our company, the things that we do with people, all those things. Because what we are learning is that more and more people get a pretty good perspective of what it's like to work for a place before they go to work there. We know that 70-something% of people, before they go apply for a job, talk to somebody who already works at that company to find out what it's like to work there. So we're going to talk about some weird mindsets that we see that have been very successful for companies that we work with, some of the companies that we don't work with, that we just observed, that would be really healthy, but they're paradigm shifts for you. It's weird. They're weird mindsets. So we're going to talk about some of those that would really help you to attract and retain talent. More better, more gooder. So we have a good chunk of our team here today. We've got Matt Griswold is with us, fresh off the road from various conferences. Matt, just say something so that everybody can hear your voice, and so they can identify you.
Say a little something into the camera. That's a Tommy Boy reference from years ago. Say a little something into the camera. I'm excited about the weird concept, Don. And for some of these things, as you all are listening, I'm not going to get all into it so we can introduce the team. But for some of these things, as we go through what our ideas of being weird might be, you might create kind of a checklist and be like, oh, okay, I kind of already do that. I didn't know that was weird. It's just something that we've started to do. Or you might go, whoa. That's way too weird for my blood, right? I can't. That sounds odd, but we just have to be a weirdly great place to work because it's not just about throwing money to get at the people to get them in the door. I've got to be a weirdly great place to work even after I begin the work, right? So, what kind of system are you feeding them into? We're going to talk about that today. Back to you, Don.
Back to me. Yes. Thank you, Matt. That was great. Thank you for saying something. And we also got Diana on our team. Diana, say something.
Hey. Hi. I think it would be hard to be famous as a podcaster, like when people would run up to you, because really, like, it's audio. They don't see your faces. So I don't know. I was just thinking about that. I think it's hard to be like a famous face as a podcaster.
Well, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Unless, I mean, we do have the YouTube version that you can go watch us.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think most people just like click and then turn their cameras or turn their phones off. Like,
Listen
it's
to us.
really audio.
So what you're
It's
saying is we need to do a little bit better branding and make sure that our faces are plastered all over the podcast
That's right.
pictures.
Yes.
Smart.
Could alternate our faces.
Yes. Bethany, you're on it. Yep.
Yeah. Well, this all takes work, as everybody on here knows. And so we might as well capitalize on that.
True.
So look
And
for
we look
our
good. So yeah.
maybe what we should do is a weird, like only like no sound podcast version where we just like do interpretive dance on new leadership principles.
Well, Philip
That
has
would be
socks
weird.
with his faces on it, with his face on it. So that's branding by itself. Philip,
That's
you're going to
true.
need to wear those socks.
Yeah, we have Philip with us. Philip, tell us about your anniversary gift, because Philip just expired. This is a good weird story, actually. This kind of fits with who we are. So we'll talk about being a weirdly good employer.
Good weird. Yeah.
Philip, tell us about your gift.
Birthday and work anniversary fall within a week of each other, which is pretty epic. So I was showered with gifts and attention. And the final gift was a pair of socks, custom socks that we waited over a month and a half for. And they have my face on it. And so I took a selfie just doing my regular smile. And what blew my mind, it's like my most token smile. It's just this excited, which again, people can't see my face, but it's like my jaw is ajar slightly to the right. My teeth are showing, and it's on my socks now, which is pretty cool. And I think it's a gift from the team because I love socks, even though I don't wear them in the hotter months. And it's also always a little bit of humility because I'm always walking on my own face. So great for branding and just great for emotional awareness.
So good. Thank you, Philip. Yeah. So that's awesome. So if you have an employee that you want to show thank you, put your face on some socks and give it to them. That's the episode. That's the takeaway. Bethany, say something new to everybody.
Oh, well, I already did, but
And we
okay.
didn't say this is Bethany. No, this is Bethany. So if you hear Bethany's
Diana,
voice.
she did acknowledge my presence with my name, which is good. But yeah, we're all a bunch of weirdos. So I'm excited to talk about weird things in organizations.
Weird
Let's
things.
do it.
Also, if you have a complaint about the company, you can bring that to HR sometime. Please do that
Okay.
offline, Bethany. We'd appreciate
Well,
that.
me and Diana talk a lot.
Don't worry. I hear it all. It's fine. I got it. There's a file this big on both of you.
Your standing Tuesday meeting complaints about Don and Matt, usually, probably.
We
Yeah.
don't even put it on the calendar. We just do it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
We have
Excellent.
a private channel in Teams. It's loaded full of stuff.
Right.
Excellent. That's excellent. That's where we start. So where do we want to start? Let's talk about some weird mindsets. And who would like to kick us off on a weird mindset that we think is actually pretty beneficial?
You know, Don, I'll start. This is Matt, for everyone that's listening. Don, you know, last week, and this is why this is hot on our mind too, fresh on our mind, because we were in Florida last week. We were speaking at a conference. Hello to our friends in Florida. We have lots of friends in Florida, actually, now that I'm thinking about this. But anyway, Don and I got off the stage. We just talked about this idea here of getting weird in the workplace, and we were there, you know, getting ready to have a sandwich or whatever for lunch, and then here comes a few of the attendees, and their question was, okay, similar to the question that Don just asked, give me an example of weird. What is weird in the workplace? And so I've jotted a few down, and I thought maybe I could throw out a couple of them. You guys, if you as you have thoughts, then feel free to throw those out too. But one thing that we would consider, in fact, Don, I think they said, okay, so of the clients that you work with, again, we don't just speak at conference, of the clients that you work with, what are some of the weird things those people are doing? Because they're trying to keep pace, right? What are some of the weird things our competitors are doing? So maybe we can steal some of these thoughts too. And one of the ones that I threw out was let the team solve their own problems. And you might listen to that and you might go, oh, I do that all the time. Like, I don't want to hear their problems at all. But I'm talking about maybe bigger problems. Not that so-and-so has an issue with so-and-so, but maybe it's a bigger problem. Maybe it's a process improvement problem. Maybe I'll give you a great example. There was a clinic that we were working with, and the clinic manager came to us and said, my team came to tell me that they wanted 4-day work weeks. Now, our initial instinct, especially if you've been in management for a long period of time, if you're a Gen Xer or a boomer or something like that, your initial response, like everybody has those inner monologues. We should do a podcast on initial inner monologue responses, and that would be a fun time, right? Our initial response is, don't we all get back to work? Diana, you could fill an hour of this, right? That's a whole nother topic. Like, let's talk about our initial response. So your team approaches you and they're like, we want 4-day work weeks. Your initial response is, yeah. And insert snarky comment here, get back to work. But I can't say that. I think the weird approach that we're encouraging people to do, and this is actually what that clinic did, was listen, I will support you in the 4-day work week if you can do X, Y, and Z, right? I've got to see X amount of patients. We've got to maintain X amount of revenue. Like here's the X, Y, and Z factors. If you all can get together and figure that out, then great. I'm totally supportive of that. This is a different mindset, maybe of years past. In years past, the manager or the leader might go, no, we can't do 4-day work weeks. And why are they saying that? Because they know X, Y, and Z in their mind, because we're not going to be able to see enough patients. We're not going to be able to drive enough revenue. We're not going to blah, 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 those types of things. But instead of keeping that, this person actually shared those. If you can do X, Y, and Z, I'm all for it. And the team got together and they actually did it. How cool is that? That the team can get together and say, hey, it's going to cause some overlapping, but it turns out we all didn't want the same day off anyway. So so-and-so is going to be off this day. So-and-so is going to be off this day. We have coverage, we have revenue, we have patients, and patient satisfaction. We can do it. To be in a situation where that leader can just stamp of approval and go, awesome. Like, as long as you guys agreed to this, we can still cover X, Y, and Z. So I think one of those things is letting the team solve their own problem as well. How do you guys feel about that one? Is that weird?
I mean, it's not weird to us because that's what we tell people to do. But I have seen many companies that don't do that. And you said, let the team solve their own problem. My thing is like, let the team, whatever it is, let the team do it, right? Solve their own problem, figure out their own policy, figure out how to do stuff, build
Buy a
helicopter.
helicopter.
Let the team.
Let the team fly a helicopter? Is that what you said, Bethany?
Buy a helicopter.
Oh, buy a helicopter.
You know what? If I gave parameters and I was like, here's what we need to get a helicopter, if you guys could figure that out, totally fine. Like,
But
I'm
I love
fine with that.
I love that's what you're saying too, and you kind of clarified it with, "Hey, as long as we," right? Because I think there is when we start talking about getting weird, and Don, we see this at conferences too, where you almost see I don't even want to say generation. You just see certain managers or certain leaders or certain owners where it's like, let the team, and they immediately start to eye roll, right? Or the heads back, like, oh, just let them do whatever they want. And I hope you're not hearing us say that, right? They can't just do whatever they want, but they probably do have a lot more flexibility than what we would have initially thought. And you may have not given them the opportunity to succeed or fail by helping to build those different processes or things too. Like, part of getting weird is, let me help you set some parameters, and if you can hit the parameters, then great, let's do it. Right? Let's do it. Teach me something new, Philip.
A part of that, I think the weirdness of it is to also just really talk about what's really going on. Because I think what we come into many, many times, different situations, but the stories are very similar in that leader or team member is super upset, super frustrated by XYZ. And when we go around and ask the whole team, we find out they're all upset about the same things, right? They see the same thing, but none of them have actually talked about it. And when you start to open the doors so that people can talk about it in a place where they don't feel judged, psychologically safer than they expected, then they start to talk about it. And as a team, want to start doing something about it. So I think a key part of that, let the team in like truth and honesty, then go do the things. And that's really empowering. Teams actually like that. And that's a key part of building team.
I love that. I think also the other thing is your core values have to be really strong so that your people can live within those core values. And I do think that's something that's weird, right? I think a lot of companies have core values, but they're not core to the company or decision making or day-to-day interaction. And so one of the things that I think help with this let them know the core values and live within those, really. So if one of your core values is respect, then every decision they're going to make has to have respect within it. If one of your core values is transparency, then you have to be transparent with them. So yeah, I think that's another one of those weird things that fit into this.
Talking about transparency, and that's a great segue as well, because sometimes organizations might feel that their folks are not making smart decisions, and that's why they don't want to give them the bandwidth. But the organization has not done a great job of sharing enough information so they can make smart decisions. And so that kind of leads me to my next one as well, of another way to get weird: share your organization's quote unquote problems. Right. Let's review what's behind the curtain just a little bit, and then it's amazing because your folks will start getting to this place where they're making more educated guesses, or they're not making some silly financial decisions if we give them a little peek behind the curtain and say, this is why I'm saying what I'm saying, or these are the things that are weighing on my mind. Here's the puzzles that I'm trying to figure out, team. Who's got an idea to be able to help us figure this out? And again, I think maybe it's weird because the old school management philosophy might say, it's my problem, it's my thing to untangle, I have climbed the mountain, I have to protect my team, whatever that might look like. But those folks that are working for you are eager to look for opportunities to be able to help you untangle those things. And you might be going, not my team, you have not met my team, they are not in it with me. And maybe that's a reflection, golly, this is going to step on toes, maybe that's a reflection on how you've been leading them. Maybe that's a reflection on the bandwidth that you've given them to be able to actually help you solve the things that you're trying to solve for. You have smart, capable people. That's one of the foundations of what People Centric is. That's one of our main foundational philosophies. We believe that you hire smart, capable people. We've just got to be able to give them the opportunities to be able to show you how smart and capable that they are. So sharing organizations' problems, would you add anything to that? And maybe problems is not the right word. I'm just really after transparency. What would you add to that? Is that weird, I guess?
I was going to share an example. When I interviewed with People Centric, the final interview was really weird. The whole team was together in a room. I'd never had this before. I had an email from Bethany a couple weeks prior. Hey, here are some things our team's literally working on, things we've actually talked about. Facilitate a meeting with our team. So again, it was a trial run facilitation for pro facilitators about things they were actually working on. So I remember just coming in and thinking, this is so weird. I've never had this in an interview before. And they're talking, I mean, genuine, real talk. People were like, yeah. And they started talking about questions and ideas of how do we store things and how do we reorganize our systems and onboard and train people and help our client, all kinds of things that were talked about in the meeting. It was just very, very real, but also very cool because I left having a great example of what the team is actually like and seeing how they apply their problem solving as well. So that's just one example.
I love that you said it was weird because we do it so often that we have forgotten that it's probably weird. But I think that's the other thing is that weird feels uncomfortable at first. So if you're going to do these things and you're going to put this stuff out here, know that it is going to be uncomfortable for some people for a little bit, probably for everyone, because it's weird.
Yeah, I like that too. They go through this uncomfortable transitional phase there. And it's hard, man, if you're in a situation where you've been holding on to all those things and you're just doing it yourself, it's hard to kind of let that go for just a little bit. I'm trusting, this is a leap of faith, as they would say. I'm trusting you with certain things. Sorry, Bethany, we're going to add something?
No, I was just going to give you my weird things. Can I go?
Oh,
Can I go for it?
yeah.
I had a couple of weird things. I was just
Yeah.
adding on because Phillips was really good. And then I was like, man, I want in on some of this weirdness. So here we
Trust
go.
me, you're already there.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Matt. I was thinking, so a couple of the ones that I was thinking about with this topic, you guys started us off really well. A couple of the ones I was thinking about were maybe people hate this one. I'm going to be honest with you. People hate this one. Maybe more meetings equal more productivity.
Ah,
Thank you
meeting.
for that. I was going to
Bethany.
pause for that.
So many people just hung up their phone, just like turned off their
Oh,
podcast, like ripped their earbuds
I know.
out. We're
I
like,
know, because
no.
they think how, first of all, I hate meetings. Second of all, how the heck can that be possible? Because if you've been in our meetings, they're not productive. And I understand that. Yes, sometimes your meetings are probably not productive, but we always say that if you have the right meetings, then they can be super productive. And a lot of times when we get into organizations, people are either doing two extremes. They're either having way too many meetings that they aren't productive, or they're having not enough meetings that they aren't productive. And so it's somewhere in the middle. But I think usually we kind of move towards the, hey, you probably need to have some more of the right meetings and make sure that they're really good meetings. And so I think that's weird sometimes for people when we come into the organization and start talking about that. So that's
Yeah,
one of
especially
them.
on like the first introduction, like let's get some more meetings in this place, and then you're fired. You're fired before you start. What we're saying, and Bethany just did a good job of laying that out too. We're not saying more meetings, but nobody wants another meeting, but everybody wants the right meeting. Right? There's probably a list of meetings that you're attending on a regular basis that you would say, I can stop doing that one immediately. It gives me nothing. I never have a takeaway from it. I'm confused why I'm continually invited to that meeting. So reevaluating that, I don't know if you believe us if we told you, we do a lot of leadership development. We have an hour-long session to teach people how to run an effective meeting. So
You
if
said
you're
a
interested,
meeting
I guess
about meetings. What?
it's a meeting about meetings. Yeah. I would
Right.
say that falls into the, especially on face value, that falls into the weird category. Let's evaluate the meeting time, because I think some people are looking at a meeting as a checkbox. Like, yep, we all met. Check, go back to work. But you're not really looking at, well, let's dive into what we're actually accomplishing at the meeting. That might be weird. Y'all think?
Totally. Yes. So I think that was one of them. Can I share my second one?
Nope, but thank you. Don,
Yeah,
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Bethany. What do you have?
that's
Go
something weird, I guess.
ahead.
Just cut each other off regularly.
Go ahead. Go
It
ahead.
works
Sorry
really
about
well
that.
for us. No, my second one was, okay, sometimes we'll hear people say, oh, this whole department is functioning terribly, or this manager is awful, and we need to do more training. Let's do more training for our managers or for our team or whatever. And I think for us, maybe the weird thing we might say is, what if we actually don't do more training? What if you look at your org chart? Why? Wait, how is that going to solve our problem? And
I
so
don't
I
get
think
it.
that's another weird thing that people underestimate is, oh, well, sometimes you might be training people and you might be throwing lots of training at them, but we're not even solving the problem that actually needs to be solved, which maybe there's structural problems. Maybe your organization, or maybe your manager has way too many employees underneath them that they can't effectively manage. Maybe we have lots of dotted lines everywhere, so people don't know how to communicate or who to communicate to at the right times, or that's just a couple of examples. But I think we're really quick to say, let's just throw more training at people when we don't like the way a team is functioning. But maybe it's something else, like let's look at your org chart. So that was my other big one.
No, I think that's good. And I'll throw it to Don from that too, because a lot of times we have the reason why that's weird is we have a tendency to blame the person when it fails. Instead of how Don talks about this from an engineering perspective, maybe it's not the person's fault. Maybe there was too much load on that beam and you didn't look in the right place. I don't want to steal your thunder, Don, or steal your words there, but did I describe that accurately?
Yeah, yeah. If your building collapses because you put too much weight on a beam, you don't yell at the beam. You yell at the design of the organization. And we say that your organization is a machine that's perfectly designed to get the results that it's currently getting. So you can keep yelling at the building saying, why did you collapse? What's wrong with you? But really what you got to do is go back to the blueprints of the machine or of the building, and which is your org chart. And there's studies that show that systems are the way that you drive culture. We talk about that a lot. You drive culture through systems. And the number one system that impacts culture is role design. making sure that everybody knows what success really does look like. And that role design also includes who they report to, how many direct reports they have, all those kinds of things. So you're right, Bethany. I don't, there's nobody that we sit down with that we don't think as a team internally where we go like, oh, we got to we'll think about the org chart and all that. But there's almost I don't ever see the client go like, yes, let's really dive into that. It's always like, well, okay, I guess we could do that. Why are we doing that? But then once we do it, then they're like, boy, that was really, really effective. That was really powerful.
All right, that's good. Thank you, Bethany. Who else has some weirdness they want to throw out here on the?
I'll throw out one. I'll throw out one.
Done.
I think we should, I think most organizations, and I say most, but I'd say 95% of organizations need fewer policies. You should actually get rid of policies. I think a lot of
the HR person, I object.
you object. Yeah.
Just kidding. No, don't. I don't. I love it. Thank you. Yes. As the HR person, I'm being weird and saying less policies. Continue.
That's true. Yeah.
And I hear a lot of people say, no, we need more policies. We need to define exactly when is this okay and when is this okay and what are we doing here and what are we doing here. And let me just be blunt. I'm just going to say it just in black and white and say that like this. You can't manage through policies. And a lot of times you think it's going to be easier. Like, well, if it's on paper, it's really nice to be able to sit down with somebody and say, I'm pulling for you, but this policy right here says that you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. But it is one of the most depeopling things, that dehumanizing things that we do is by saying, I think about like, I've worked for companies that have bereavement policies. Like, okay, so you have a bereavement policy. And I worked for one company, a large company, we'll just call them 3M because that's who it was, who had a policy on like bereavement. And it was, you had got so many days off depending on how close the person was to you. But then they couldn't just say that. They had to define like certain relationships. So if it's like a parent or a child, you got this many days off. If it was a grandparent or somebody else like that, you got this many days off. And they had to go through this whole definition of all this stuff, like eliminate all that crap. And if you're thinking, well, how am I going to treat everybody the same way? That's the other weird thing I want to put on there. That's an ancillary to that. Stop doing that too. Don't treat everybody the same way. Maybe you don't have to have a no cell phone policy. Maybe the person who's on their cell phone all the time is distracting their work. What you have to do is you have to go to that person and say, you can't have a cell phone because it keeps distracting you at work. It's messing up you. This other person over here can have a cell phone because they doesn't seem to be impacting their performance and what they're doing. Go back to the performance of the actual job. And that goes back to the role design and everything. Go back to performance of the job. And if you can perform within that, I don't have to create all these policies to fit with everything. I don't know what you all think of that.
Preach. I love it.
I love it. I love it too. I mean, and this is something where I would definitely put that into the weird category. And people's minds are exploding right now. I know their minds are, whoa, I can't do that. Liabilities, yada yada yada, within the workplace. But I like how you're talking about. Let's focus on what's really important, and maybe it's the performance of the individual. And people perform at different levels, but differently under different circumstances too. And so, a lot of that maybe comes down to understanding who it is that you have on your team. Recognizing what the people are bringing on the team there as well. Don, you shared, and you can go there if you want to or not, but it just popped into my mind. But you shared about your friend that was hired for some overnight gig, and it was supposed to take 6 hours. And he went to the organization and said, "Good news, I can do all of that within an hour." Right? And I may be butchering the story, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it was the overnight shift at a donut shop, and it was like it was like he had to clean it up and get everything ready for the next day. And they said, we're going to pay you. It's a 6-hour shift to do all the work. Well, he went in, and after about a week, he figured out how to do his 6 hours worth of work in an hour. And so he went to his boss and he said, I would like you to pay me for 6 hours of work, but I'm only going to do it in an hour. And if you want to check, like come in at the end of the day and check. And if everything is at the end, like ready for the next day and everything's set up, and I'll even make some improvements on it, by the way. I'll do a better job than the person did, but it's only going to take me an hour versus 6 hours. But I don't only want to get paid for 1 hour because you're paying me by the hour. Would you pay me by 6 hours? And they laughed at him, right? They laughed at him and got no, he ended up quitting. He left. They never found out what he could actually do there. That guy is running a large company right now. I always just think that donut shop got lost in their policy, which I get it. Like, it's a weird thing to think of somebody comes in and it's, I can hear you on Instagram, somebody posting a video of like, if I could do my 6 hours in 1 hour, would you pay me for 1 hour? And the traditional thing is be like, all right, sit down, millennial, sit down, Gen Z or whatever it is. Like, you have to do your job and I'm going to pay you for the number of things. But the weird way to think about it is to open up your mind a little bit and work together on it and think about the final performance of what's happening. And if somebody can do a 6-hour job in 1 hour, you probably want to hear them out. You probably want to find out what it is, and maybe you pay them differently. I think
Yeah,
about it
maybe.
too in terms of like leave, like people like needing leave of absences or even vacation times. We talked about our open time off policy. It's like what we've told our team, and Diana wrote something brilliant, I think, in our HR manual about this and said, like, our open time off policy, any failures in this policy are a reflection on the person, not the policy. I think that's absolutely brilliant. If somebody on our team said, okay, well, how much time off do I really get? And they started pushing that and taking, 6, 7, 8 weeks off at a time or something like that and dumping it and not making and saying, I don't care about the clients. You all have to figure that out. The mindset is, what are you going to give me? Then that doesn't work for our team. Our mindset is like, we can do whatever you want to, as long as we're solving it together, as long as we're on the same page. Of when you go on vacation, we have to figure out how to make sure that all that work's still getting done. As long as we're on the same page on that, I don't care how much vacation you take. That's a weird mindset, and I think that goes along with the policy thing too.
I love that. Again, we're probably shattering a lot of paradigms that people are stuck in at work. However, if you are one of those people, and maybe just pulse check this for a second, if you're one of those people, it feels like your paradigms are being shattered right now. I can't do that. I can't do that. Take a look around. Take a look around the workplace. Are you fully staffed? Are you having a hard time finding people? Are you surrounded by people that are helping you pursue the thing that you're pursuing? Do they find value in accomplishing the things that you're trying to accomplish? Are they helping you push this thing that you are doing, across the finish line, or not? Like, are you looking around going, how are we going to accomplish all these things? I have so many gaps I need to fill. Man, it's time. It's probably time to get weird. It's probably time to get weird. I'm going to throw one more out, and then whoever else would like to chime in or add to, then feel free to do that. And this maybe goes along with the process thing. The way I put it on here is pulse check your standards. Pulse check your standards. What are you holding people accountable to? Because we are not advocating for a workplace of no accountability, right? We're still fans of having accountability within the workplace. The difference is maybe pulse check the standards of the things that you're holding accountability to. Which is similar to the process discussion or the purpose discussion there that we just had. But pulse checking those standards, maybe there are some things that we need to rework, and just give yourself the bandwidth to be able to rework, and maybe even co-create some of those with your staff too, depending on the team or the organization.
Yeah, and I think the output of that one, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to say, don't do normal performance management. Your traditional performance management, where we sit down and do a yearly review with an employee to talk about their performance, that's an antiquated, bad system. That is a system where you sit down and say, Diana, I'm so glad we got to meet right now. I would like to talk to you about this meeting where you rolled your eyes at me that happened back in February. Now it's June and I didn't tell you about it at the time, but I wrote it down. Like, there's so many bad processes around that. Now we do advocate, like, check in with your people and find out if they're okay. Like just have conversations. And I think if you have regular tempos of conversations with your managers and employees, I think that's good. But don't make it just performance management. And then if you are performance managing, going back to what Matt said, if you have a standard, what is the standard that you're measuring against? Not just, do I think you're doing a good job? That's another weird thing, is that you don't know if your employees are most managers don't know if their employees are doing a good job or not. I would throw that out there too, like, because they don't know what the standard is for really what the job is. It hasn't been really set. The expectation hasn't been set.
Yeah. And I think if you have to have an annual review, great, that's fine. Everybody has to work within the confines of the HR policies that are set, right? The procedure that is set. But in that review, nothing should be a surprise. You should have talked to all of those people 100 times before this annual review, and you should not shock them with anything. They should know what's going to be in it. But I was just thinking, we've talked a lot about leaders thinking differently and getting weird. But what if you're an employee sitting here thinking, like, I want to work for someone like that, or I want to try to get my organization to be weird? Are there ways that employees can engage in this and also be weird?
One of, when we were talking about policies or even open time off or other things, I think an employee response to a lot of those things is how you approach it. And the shorthand for a lot of what we talk about at People Centric, I would say, is the difference of ownership as an employee versus O. ownership, because if there's a policy, well, I'm owed 2 weeks. So Bethany and Diana, sorry, but I'm leaving anyway, right? Ownership is I want to go on this thing for 2 weeks and there's openness and let's work together to make it done. Like I own and care as much about these things as you do, not as much as Diana. I care a lot, but I feel like Diana is just cares even more. But it's I think that because we hear a lot of especially small businesses that are actually owned by one person. And they'll say, I just wish my employees thought like the owner. And the truth is, they probably won't because they don't own the business. They did not build it, they didn't sweat for it. And they also don't go home probably with the same return. And not that you're overflowing with cash, owner, but also you probably make more than a lot of these employees that you wish you behaved, like owners. So, but that approach as an employee, what if you actually did take more ownership of things? What if you're not trying to blame other people or figure stuff out only through policy, but you have the permission to use influence? And I think that's probably the final part is that we say everyone has influence and you have different probably amounts of influence based on title or skills or gifts, but recognizing that everyone has influence. And so with the influence you have, you actually can impact people and do really cool things. There was someone I talked with recently who said, I don't have influence. And I just said, really? Like, what? Just tell me about the things you do in the day. And she listed tons of different things that she does every day. I was like, well, you have influence over those. And how do they impact your team? And the light bulb kind of hit when she thought, oh, like then there is a lot of influence here, right? I do make a big difference. I do support my team. And so owning that makes a huge difference for your team, whatever level you're at.
I think the two weird things to add to that, Philip, of what an employee can do that's weird is number one is don't bring it, just like you said, the ownership versus ownership. Don't bring your problem. Go from the perspective of the organization's problem or your manager's problem. Like present solutions, that kind of idea. It's that idea. And then the other thing is don't just go in with a presentation, go in with questions and then answer the questions. Go in and say, hey, is this an issue for us? Could we, are we having trouble finding some people? I've got some ideas. Well, it's going in and asking questions and knowing that you could be wrong about some of the things that you're thinking about too, just being a little bit humble in your approach. It's tricky. The stuff that managers do that make them highly influential to employees also works for employees trying to be highly influential with their managers. That's why in this podcast, we encourage everybody to listen to it because it applies to everybody. I know that there's different levels of authority. And if I say don't have a performance management system, like I know that most people on this call, they can't change that for their company, but you can try to influence that.
Yeah, I'm with you. Using the influence to be able to maybe create a proposal within the confines of the structure of the organization that you have. The example of that I started this call with too, with the clinic, the 4-day work week. The reason why that worked so well is because they presented a problem, they got approval to work on the problem, and they didn't just do it from, like Don said, the mindset of themselves. They did it and made sure that they took care of the company's processes and foundation as well. And so they didn't leave the company high and dry. It's so much easier to get things done with your leaders of the organization if you're willing to also put in some of the work on that thing as well. And you do it, delicately with the company standards in mind too. So anyway, we've covered a lot of ground here. Any other directions you'd like to go, or are we ready to wrap this one up?
I think it's a good message just to be weird. I like this message. You have to think weirdly. You can't just keep modifying the things that you're already doing. And we see that at conferences all the time. Employers don't realize what's happening and how quickly this is changing and how badly it will be if they don't make significant radical changes to their organization.
Yeah, I heard someone say the other day, the times have changed, so it's time to change. So I was like, yeah, it has.
Good.
And I think it's changed really quickly. It's kind of given people whiplash. You went away for COVID and you come back and the world is a different place. That's what it feels like. I think it's been changing slowly over time and it wasn't a COVID thing, but still, yeah, the times have changed. So it's time to change and we have to do what we're saying. Think differently, get weird.
I love that. I think that's great. That's a great, who said that? Do you know? Are we given? I'd like to give credit to wherever that came from.
Jimmy.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Shout out to Diana's husband. That's
Yeah.
that's
Way to go, Jimmy.
It was
I like it.
brilliant.
I like it. But no, that like he's right. Like the sentiment of that is correct. If I'm an employer and I'm wanting to succeed and I'm wanting to continue to grow, I got to get a little bit weird. And for the employees that are out there, these weird organizations exist, and I don't blame you for trying to find them. Right within this time. So we're competing for talent. It's time to get weird. If you got something from the podcast, hopefully you took at least one thing, maybe some sort of a aha moment or some sort of an action item, or share that with your group, share that with your team. Feel free to share the podcast as well. We love our listeners. Episode 192 right now, quickly approaching episode 200. 200 times we've had to sit here with each other and look at each other and do this. And you know what? That sounded rude, but I love all of you. I love all of you very much. So it's been wonderful. Share the podcast. Feel free to give us ideas for topics and things. And really just, hey, get out there. Let's get weird, everybody. Let's get weird. Have a great day. See you soon.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.